Thank you all for coming. I'm so very excited for this. I've been looking forward to it. I want to introduce Robert Buxton. He's a classical pianist, and he's going to put on a show for us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is it?
Yes, thank you very much, Tracy, for having me. Thank you all for coming. It's great to be back. I was here, about half a year ago or something like that. So, what I'm going to start with, I always like to start with improvising, because I think that what classical music has we've kind of lost a little bit is this spontaneousness. And if you were to go back to the 19th century or even before, you would have a lot of improvising and spontaneous things happening in concerts. And so I think it was Cindy who wrote to me that this was about, she said, could you feature something for the 250th birthday of America? And that's what it is. So I was thinking I would do a 19th century style improvisation on God Bless America. What it's going to really look like is I'm going to do a Franz Liszt-like, introduction, long and not that long, but flowery introduction, and then just sort of go into that piece somehow. And it's an improvisation, so you never know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen, so I know that there'll be some God Bless America. And I love that song because, Irving Berlin is the quintessential American composer, songwriter, and he was born in Russia. And he came here, and this is the great story of America, that he's as American as you get. And that's, you don't have to be born here to be the soul of the country. So here is to embody the soul of it. So here's what I'm going to do with it. You won't hear the tune right away, I'm just warning you. Thank you. So that was just, some improvising around the tune. And this is in a tradition, it's in a tradition of improvisation, embellishment, and I'm going to play now a composition that's kind of along those lines. This is the Ave Maria by Schubert, but it's arranged by Liszt for solo piano. Liszt would do those kinds of things, in concert. And I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. The main reason is that I don't sing. I can't sing. I've tried and failed many times. I have a friend that's a very good singer, and they told me everybody can sing. You just have to breathe deeply and trust yourself. And after telling me all those hippie things, I tried to do it, and they listened to me sing a few notes, and they said, on second thought, maybe not everybody can sing. So I don't sing. But what Liszt has done with Ave Maria, he's taken Schubert's Ave Maria and transformed it into a solo piano piece. And the story with Ave Maria, Schubert wrote it towards the end of his life in 1828. And he only lived to be 31 years old, which is just remarkable. It's unbelievable. He wrote so much music in those last years. I read that he would fall asleep with his glasses on, wake up with his glasses still on, because he would literally write music until the moment he fell asleep, and from the moment he woke up, he knew his time was limited. And when Schubert died in 1828, he was virtually unknown, except for a small group of friends. He was penniless. Although I've read conflicting things, I just read something that said that actually his music was starting to sell and he was starting to become more well-known. But still, his last years were very tragic. He was very ill, and he did not really see the kind of recognition that he deserved with his brilliance. But it was after he died that people started to really take notice of his music, particularly Franz Liszt. Liszt came across his Lieder, spelled L-I-E-D-R, for voice and piano. And he did these beautiful arrangements, Liszt did these beautiful arrangements of Schubert's Lieder for solo piano. And it had two purposes. One was to promote Schubert. Liszt had this philanthropic side too. But Liszt could also be a bit of a show-off, let's be honest. And so he knew that these pieces were going to make him look good as a pianist in concerts. And these were very prominent parts of his early recital programs. You've heard of Listomania. Liszt was like a rock star in the early 19th century, and he played this Ave Maria. So it's a familiar piece, of course. What he does with it is he changes it a bit. A good translator in literature changes things too. They don't do the Google Translate thing. That's just a word for word. A good translator reimagines the text in the new language. So what Liszt does is he gives us the music pretty much as it is at first. So you're going to hear. But then, so that's pretty familiar, but then later, Liszt adds a lot of Liszt to it. Or for example, like all of those extra notes, that ain't Schubert. Liszt put that in, and did he do it to show off? I don't see it that way. I think he added that in because he knew that without the singer and without the words, it might get boring after a while. It's repetitive. So he knew that by adding those extra notes, he makes it work as a piano piece, a standalone piano piece. So this is Schubert arranged by Liszt, Ave Maria. So, my wife is also a pianist, and recently she was asked to play for a wedding somewhere. And they said, could you play Ave Maria, please, at the wedding? And she said, which one? There are many Ave Marias. They said, don't get smart with us. There's only one Ave Maria. Play that one. And she said, well, no, we don't want to hear it. So she played the Schubert, and that's what they wanted. But for example, there's this other Ave Maria by Charles Gounod. It's sort of by Gounod and by Bach. I'll explain how. So in the 1850s, the French composer, Charles Gounod, he was spending some time with his father-in-law, and they were looking at Bach. And I love that because I think everybody should look at Bach with their in-laws. The world would be a better place, So they were looking at this prelude in C major from the Well-Tempered Clavier. It's very familiar by Bach. Maybe you've heard that. And Gounod spontaneously he improvised a melody on top. Speaking of improvising, he made up this melody, just played it, and it goes like this. And that's pretty familiar too, but what that is he's using Bach as the accompaniment and put this melody on top. Well, the father-in-law thought that this was brilliant, and he actually wrote out the improvisation that Gounod did. Gounod later touched it up a bit and published it as a violin piece first. And then he decided to turn it into a vocal piece. He added the Ave Maria text, the Latin Hail Mary prayer, as the text, and published it as a vocal piece. There's some recordings in it where you have a violinist play it through one time and then a singer do it the second time or something like that. It's absolutely beautiful. Jascha Heifetz did that. He played it with, a choir, I think. So this solo piano version is by Georges Bizet, the man who wrote Carmen. So this is actually a 4-person piece I'm going to play for you. It's Bach, it's Gounod, it's the father-in-law, and it's Bizet. And it's another version of Ave Maria. you. Now I'd like to play, well, another vocal piece arranged for piano. And you might ask me, oh, what is it? You don't like the piano? That's not true. I like the piano, but I especially like pretending to be something I'm not, like a singer or a cellist or a violinist, anything. Maybe to say it in a better way, I'm kind of obsessed with old recordings. And when I listen to old recordings of pianists, I'm talking about like 100 or more years old recordings, I love to hear old pianists like Paderewski and others play, but I really especially love to hear singers and violinists from that many years ago. And the reason is that when I hear those instruments, they're not as familiar to me. And so I feel like I learn more from those recordings. And then with all these arrangements like that I'm playing, I'm able to maybe emulate a little bit what they're doing. I'm not trying to copy them, but I think I get something out of it. Anyway, that's just my little obsession, is playing non-piano music on the piano. And this is the Widmung, or Dedication, by Robert Schumann, arranged by Liszt for solo piano. If I were to sing the words in German, the text is by Friedrich Ruckert. My German is not great, but when I went to Germany and Austria, you know what? They told me that my pronunciation was perfect, but they said that everything else was horrible in my German. So that was, at least, got to look on the bright side. There was something good. Now, Schumann wrote this as a wedding gift, as a wedding present for his wife, Clara, fiancée at the time. And their path to marriage was a difficult one, because Clara's father, Frederick, was Robert's piano teacher and did not approve of him as a suitor for his daughter. For one thing, Schumann damaged his hands, so that didn't help as a piano student. He used a device meant to strengthen the pinky finger, ended up damaging the muscles in his hands. I think last time I was here I played some of Schumann's Paganini arrangements, and so I may have told you a bit about Schumann. But the central thing in Robert Schumann's life was he had bipolar disorder. And in those days, in the 1830s and 40s, they didn't really know how to treat it or really what it was. And so Frederick, Clara's father, viewed Robert as just an erratic person, not suited for marriage. What's interesting, though, is he was a great husband and father. They had 7 children together. He was a wonderful person. Many people with bipolar disorder, I know some, they have a heightened sensitivity to things, obviously. They're brilliant, and they're kind and good people. It's not like, I don't like it, some people will say Robert Schumann was crazy. Wagner was crazy. Schumann just had this terrible condition, but he wasn't crazy, I don't think. I wouldn't say that. So anyway, they finally got married, and he writes this piece for her. By the way, Clara, who became Clara Schumann, she was a brilliant pianist and composer herself. So the equal of Robert. And actually, she was a child prodigy, and she would go all around Europe performing, and Robert would often stay home with the kids. He was almost like a stay-at-home dad a lot of the time. He was a very, very good father. But anyway, this piece, it's typical with Schumann. You can't be too stable with Schumann's music. There's some instability there, like ocean waves or something. It's always, I made the mistake once of playing some Schumann for my teacher in a too calm of a manner. I'll show you what I mean. I played. Something like that. My teacher said, well, that's very nice, but I have the feeling like you're just sitting having a nice cup of coffee, you're reading the newspaper, you have some slippers on and a bathrobe. He said, that's not Schumann. Schumann is on fire. Every note has to be on fire. You have to... And I got it, when he said that. Schumann has to be bursting at the seams almost. And I had another teacher say it this way. He said, you want to feel Schumann's music? Look at Van Gogh's Starry Night painting. And by the way, he had a mental illness too. He had bipolar, I think. And there's those swirling paintbrush lines. I mean, that's what Schumann is. Look at the piano concerto of Schumann. It is. So, anyway, this piece, this Widmung, this dedication by Schumann, what it does is it depicts the feeling of being in love. You know, if you're in love, you're talking to the person you're in love with. You don't talk in a matter-of-fact way. You can't. Your heart is racing, and you might have butterflies in your stomach. Like it would sound like this. So that's Schumann. That's this. This is an exhilarating piece, and it's kind of manic. That's how I describe it, which makes sense. You know, with bipolar, he had the manic side and the depressive side. So here is Widmung by Schumann. This is arranged once again by Liszt for solo piano. So you're going to hear a bit of Franz Liszt as well. I'll tell you a quick story about the Schumanns and Liszt. Robert Schumann and Franz Liszt, they got along okay. They weren't huge friends, but they were friendly. But Clara Schumann hated Liszt with a passion. She said, she called him a spoiled child. So and she wasn't totally wrong, because Liszt could be kind of, you know, showy, show-off, you know. Well, here's what Liszt knew this, that she didn't like him. And he knew that what Clara especially hated was over-the-top arrangements of Paganini for the piano. So when Robert Schumann wrote his Paganini studies, which are very over-the-top, guess who he dedicated them to? Clara Schumann. Call it a practical joke. But here is the Widmung arranged by Liszt by Robert Schumann. absolutely love Schumann. I feel like I love a lot of music, but there's something in Schumann that's so real and vulnerable and raw in that piece, for example. And this is, I was thinking about, how he died, which was terrible. He tried to take his own life, and then he was institutionalized and died at 46. He was hearing voices, he had really declined. And he believed and said very often in his later years that he was a failed composer, which is nonsense, because, you listen to his music and I don't know what to say. I don't have favorites in music because I like all of it, just like food, why do I have to pick one? But he's one of my favorites. So now I'm gonna play a piece, another favorite, but maybe you don't hear this so much, and that's what's attractive about it for me. This is the Intermezzo number 1 by Mexican composer Manuel Ponce. Ponce is very well known for his guitar music, and by the way, I think this piece sounds like a guitar piece. This is like the only actual piano piece I'm playing right now. It's not an arrangement. How weird. But it's, Ponce was born in Mexico and studied in Berlin. He wrote this piece in 1908, just to give you an idea of when. And like many other Latin American composers, he had this tension in him. Should I be a European composer, or should I stay true to my roots and write music that's based on the folk music of my country? And he eventually sort of blended both. This piece sounds like a blend of both. There's a little bit of a Chopin feeling to it maybe, but there's also these thirds. Did you notice it's in the same key? I love it. It's kind of fit the song, right? This is the piece. And that sounds like Mexican folk music. I'll give you another example of this, a composer from this part of the world and their conflict with should I be European or not. Aaron Copland is one of the greatest American composers. Where did he study? He studied in Paris with Nadia Boulanger. Oh, you don't get more French than that. And then what did he do? He came back to the U.S. and it was the Depression. And so he wrote these pieces like Billy the Kid and Rodeo. You don't get more Americana than that. And so that's what I mean. And with Ponce, it's kind of the same thing. I really think Latin American composers need to be heard more, especially this composer, this piece. So this piece, it's very melancholy. It's beautiful, but it's kind of depressing in a way. I don't know. Here it is. This is the Intermezzo number 1 by Manuel Ponce. Thanks. Have you heard of the Buc-ee's being built in Mebane? I live there. So you're thinking, what does this have to do with anything? Well, I'll tell you what, I live not too far from there. And they keep saying, well, you know, it's going to be ready soon, and then it's not. And they keep delaying. That's how it goes with a lot of construction projects. And that's how it's going with this latest piece that I'm going to play, some of for you. I'm doing my own arrangement for solo piano of Rachmaninoff's Rhapsody on the Theme of Paganini. And it's for piano and orchestra, but I can't really fit a whole orchestra here. The logistics don't work, so I'm writing my own version, just smushing it all into one piano part. It's kind of crazy. I'm starting to regret doing it, but it's too late to stop. So I have to complete it. Well, this is a late Rachmaninoff piece. He wrote it in 1935. And Rachmaninoff's life was kind of in two parts. You know, in the first part was in 19th century pre-revolutionary Russia. He was mentored by Tchaikovsky. Well then, in 1917, when the communist revolution happened, he got out with his family and he never went back. And he lived mostly in the US at that time and became a proud American citizen, loved this country, but he was very nostalgic for Russia. He never quite could get over it. I think he also had clinical depression, probably, just like with Schumann and bipolar. So Russian nostalgia is a very familiar thing to me. I'll tell you a personal story about that. You know, my mother's from Russia. She's an immigrant from Russia. And the other day, like 2 or 3 days ago, she called me up. And my parents live 20, 30 minutes away, so we're seeing them a lot and stuff. It's great. So my mom says, Robert, I cook borscht for you. You have to come eat. I said, Mom, it's first of all, it's North Carolina. It's July. It's 100 degrees out, 100% nearly humidity. And you think I'm going to come eat this heavy, hot Russian soup made of beets and cabbage? But that's the power of Russian nostalgia. And Rachmaninoff, by the way, his house in the U.S. was an exact replica of his house in Russia, because he was so, rooted in Russian culture. And you hear it in this music. On the other hand, this piece is very much affected by America, I think, because his early music uses these long melodies that never end almost, that just go on and on like. You see, it just goes on and on and on like. This reminds me of like reading Tolstoy. One sentence can go for an entire page. And that's like this. But here's the beginning of the Paganini Rhapsody, and it's completely different. It's sharper, and it's in little distinct phrases, That's what you experience. You step off the boat in Ellis Island and you go to Midtown Manhattan in 1925 or whatever. That's what that's it to me. That's how I see it. So, to me, this composition, it's a series of vignettes through the rear view mirror. And some of it is looking around him. I mean, there's this American influence, but a lot of it is his, Russian nostalgia. So you're going to hear a few things in this. You're going to hear the Paganini 24th Caprice. Famous violin piece. He uses that sort of, and you'll hear it and then it kind of goes away. You're going to hear the sound of Russian church bells, which was something he did throughout his life. He was a devout Russian Orthodox Christian, although the church excommunicated him because he married his cousin, but that's a different story. So, those are your Russian bells. You also are going to hear this melody that goes like this. You ever heard that before? That is a chant from the Middle Ages called the Dies Irae, the Day of Wrath. It's a spooky, menacing thing. Have you ever seen The Shining by Stanley Kubrick? He uses that throughout the movie at different points. And Rachmaninoff was obsessed with it because I think he was seeing world events. The Second World War was not too far off. I mean, he was reacting to the horrors of the 20th century, I think. So there's just a bunch of these ingredients in this piece. I'll tell you a quick story about Rachmaninoff, the person. So I told you my mother's an immigrant from Russia. Right? My dad is an immigrant from Southern Virginia. So I may have told you that last time, but it's true, he really is like an immigrant from there. And his father, my grandfather, Sam Buxton, was in dental school in Richmond, Virginia in around 1935 when this piece was written. And he had a part-time job as a stagehand at a concert series. And one night, there was a recital being given by Rachmaninoff himself. You know, he lived in the US, he made his living as a concert pianist. And the boss told my grandfather, don't let anybody through these doors. So, okay, fine. Well, somebody tried to get through the doors. So my grandfather pushed the door back, and there was a struggle with the door. And then all of a sudden, wham, the door was kicked open. And it was Rachmaninoff. You know how he looked, Rachmaninoff? He was 6.5 feet tall. He had a shaved head. He was Russian. He never smiled. Somebody said he looked like an escaped convict. And he spoke to my grandfather. I tell people, Rachmaninoff spoke to my grandfather. You know what he said? He said, get out of my way. So I have a personal connection to Rachmaninoff. He spoke to my grandfather. He could be very gruff if you didn't know him. I've heard stories about that, obviously this one. So here is a little chunk of the piece. This is the Rhapsody on the Theme of Paganini by Rachmaninoff, my own arrangement for solo piano. So again, it's just a chunk of it to give you a little taste of the piece. So.
Now,
You happen to know the name of the first song that was ever written with notes on a page so other people could follow?
The very first
The very first song
in history.
in history.
Well, yeah, depends on who you ask. But there was an ancient Greek drinking song written on a vase somewhere. Is that what you're, the epitaph of Seculos?
Well, when I was taught in music appreciation
Oh yeah, that's usually the very first thing in the textbook.
in a college course,
Oh yeah.
it was called What Child Is This?
Oh, well, in the Middle Ages, yeah. It's a little later, but I think, you know what? I think we're both right. I think what you said is probably the first actually well-known piece. It's not like everybody goes around singing that ancient Greek song. Come on. But everybody knows Greensleeves. So, I was just looking at the time. Let me do one real quick classical piece, and then I'm going to play a gospel to close. This is very short because this is like a minute. Flight of the Bumblebee by Rimsky-Korsakov. It's very appropriate for this time of year. You might get chased by one outside. Don't go outside. So in the opera, there's a prince who turns himself into a bumblebee so that he can go see the Tsar, who happens to be his dad. It's a Russian fairy tale. They don't make any darn sense. I grew up on it. This is Rachmaninoff's arrangement of the Rimsky-Korsakov Flight of the Bumblebee. You might start itching. I do sometimes because I feel like so. You know what, when does dinner start? Just can I? 5:30, okay. Can I go over just a couple minutes past 5? Is that okay? Is that okay? Okay, because I would, I love music, but it's my second passion in life. My first is food, so I wouldn't want to make you late. I want to play you a different version of Flight of the Bumblebee, different arrangement. Have you ever heard two different people tell the same story and one person sticks to the facts and another person just doesn't? That's the second version. Embellishes, adds sections, adds things. This is György Cifra's arrangement. Cifra was a 20th century Hungarian gypsy pianist, unbelievable pianist. He tried to escape Hungary in the 1950s, and the Soviets imprisoned him and sentenced him to hard labor. He damaged the ligaments and muscles in his arms from lifting heavy stones all day long. You could see in videos of his playing, he's wearing these thick bracelets around his arms to support them. It did not affect his technique at all, because he had a superhuman technique. It's insane how he played. And what he does with Flight of the Bumblebee is he turns it into it doesn't even sound like a bumblebee anymore. It sounds like swarms of hornets and yellow jackets. It's like... So, this is one of the craziest pieces I've ever done. So this is the Cifra version of Flight of the Bumblebee. close with some gospel. This is, I told you my dad's an immigrant from Southern Virginia. This is his music. This is an old-time gospel tune that they don't really sing it in the churches so much anymore. And it's called On the Jericho Road. You ever heard it? And this will be it, so I'm going to close with this. Thank you all for having me. So here's On the Jericho Road. All right, thank you.
See ya. Thank you.